Okay, so I developed this thing and it's called the emotions triangle. Now, the point of the emotions triangle is for you to be able to know what depth level that you're actually working at when you do uh, music videos, when you're working on in acting, when you're working in creative arts. You're looking at being able to which level of emotion are you actually working at. So the emotion triangle goes down particularly how to be able to tell and identify where your emotion actually is working from. Are you actually working from your emotion, or are you working from something else? My name is Simon Blake. I have written over 6 acting books. I've studied over 8,000 acting classes. Yes, classes. Over 8 feet of notebooks on acting and all kinds of stuff. So let's get into this. The emotions triangle is incredibly important. Now, the reason why, where you work from in your acting, if you work from this level, or you work from this level, or you work from your gut, it's going to make a difference. Now, back in New York City, they used to call it gut to gut work when they actually did really good exercises in the acting classes. And the reason why is because they understood the value of emotion. And then it was a big thing to be able to, there's a lot of developments that happen in the acting world. Um, there's a lot of stuff that's about to happen, hopefully, because we have to focus on emotion. We have to be able to work and know. First of all, we have to know whether or not we're working from a thought. Let me just go through this. This is there's other people's thoughts and ideas. So there's other people's thoughts. There's other people's ideas. Then there's your own thoughts. There's your ideas. Then you have your inclinations. Your inclinations. Now that's a connection to your instinct. And now inclinations will only occur if whether or not you're open or not. And then you have your feelings. Now your feelings then will go into your resonating feelings, which will basically that's your deep feelings. And then you've got your emotions, and then you have your deep emotions. So that's the triangle. The actual triangle is this the place of which you work from. Now, you might be able to do your emotional work for your acting or creating, and you might start with another person's great idea, or even your own great idea, and it might lead very quickly to an emotion. But it would be an elevator trip that you actually go on that activates you. There's something that has depth about that activates that. But if you go into acting, or you go into a scene, or you're working on a music video, and you're thinking that you're going to be able to do some scene, and you've only got in your self activation work, in your emotional preparation. I like to call it emotional activation. Um, Other schools of thought will call it emotional recall. Whatever technique you're going to use to be able to get your emotion, you work to be able to. If it could be a past memory, it could be a daydream, it could be whatever. The thing is that when you get this concept, when you get the emotion, when you're able to understand that you're working off of an emotion rather than just working off of a feeling, your work is going to be completely, absolutely different. So the first thing here is other people's thoughts. Other people's thoughts are going to be the weakest of things to work from. And if you've spent time and concentrated on an emotional range, so I have emotional preparation books. There's 700 plus emotions in that 3 book series. We go into every single one of those emotions, so you can isolate the resonance or the frequency or the emotional range of that specific emotion. Now, if you get to the point where you literally have that emotion, but you only have the other thought of another person with that emotion, you need to know that that's what you're working from. You can still work from that. You could probably, maybe even possibly create stuff from that, but you're going to know that that's what it is. And the clearer you are about which part of yourself that it is almost like a triangle chakra system that goes down in the body. The more that you're able to resonate with something, you're going to have more than just another person's thought or idea to work with. So the next one is the ideas. You're working from other people's ideas. Now, sometimes other people's ideas are greater than your own, and it's great and a great thing to be able to acknowledge that. And it's also very, very helpful to know that you must work with your own thoughts and ideas, even if they're not as good as others. So we're working through others' thoughts, others' ideas. We get into the top of the triangle with your own thoughts and your own ideas. Your own thoughts are going to be thoughts that are genuinely your belief systems, things that you actually believe. Your own ideas might be things that you've actually created or you've had original ideas about. That's going to bring you more into your probably this area of the body. You're literally going to be in a frame where you're working with your thoughts, your own thought, your own ideas. You're working to be able to work. It's going to spark stuff to be able to work off of. This is vital because if you're working with a thought or an idea and it stimulates you enough, as soon as you start to do the acting interaction, then something could happen to you, and then it could, because you've got that stamina, you've got that determination. But if you're trying to craft the art and the art of acting or the art of emotion, or you're able to try and get into a certain resonance or frequency where you're literally getting into or the mood of the scene before it starts, or you're getting into what priorly happened before the scene starts, you're going to have to go into these other areas and these other layers of depth. So the next one here is your inclination. Your inclinations is part of your instincts. Your inclination, I've seen so many times, actors, and I've been less than 10 feet away for over 8,000 classes, where actors are working on being able to get their thought idea, their emotional preparations done, and I'm watching them, I'm saying, no, they don't got it, or yes, they have it, or I can tell, because I've seen it so often. And this emotions triangle will help you be able to see whether or not they're actually working from an inclination or if they're working from their own thought or idea. Typically, the ideas and thoughts are up here. But sometimes when when you have something that's your own personal thought or idea, then it goes a little bit deeper. It ricochets in a little bit more into your chest cavity. Now, your feeling. Your feelings, I always often say that feelings are inclinations. Inclinations are the ability to be able to have receptors open, and then they very quickly, once you're able to get into your inclinations, if they have any sort of meaning to you, or meaning, even a belief system, can trigger an inclination into a feeling. And you can see this in the acting if you watch carefully enough, and if the camera and everything's working right, you've got everything set up correctly, clear enough in the actor. A lot of times, some of these stuff is edited out in the final edits, but the best films show these contrasts, and it's rarely it's easier to probably see in the acting exercises than some of the acting scenes, depending on the work. But the feeling of the intricacies of the uh, inclinations versus the feeling. The feelings themselves are going to feel to you as they might be emotion. The feelings are going to feel as if because there's a tinglination when it comes to feeling. So the inclination is the past your own thought process. Now, your own genuine thought processes are going to bounce into, it's your thought, it's your idea, you have some authenticity with it. It's going to bounce up and down between, some little bit of feeling and a little bit of inclination, but to be really clear about it, it's going to mostly just be your thought. But when you get into the inclinations, and then you get into your instincts, and then you get into your feelings, then you're starting to really get into the ability that you have more responses that are actually coming from you based on the time that you've spent with your emotional preparation. So when you're doing your emotional preparation, when you only work with your thoughts and your ideas, you know that you're actually working from your own genuine work. But you might be better to work with somebody else's thoughts or ideas if it produces deeper feelings, or eventually it will work, hopefully, to be able to get emotions. But this is part of the creative process that you have as an actor and as an artist. Deciding where you're going to work from is going to change everything. You're going to be able to get yourself to a place where you know exactly where you're working from. So when you're working from only your feelings, you're working from the tingleinations. They're tangible tingleinations. You can feel. You might have just spotty responses that will come from you. There could be a lot of spontaneity. There could be a lot of glibness. There could be all sorts of things, but it's only a feeling. Then what will happen when you work beneath the feeling is you get into deep feeling. Now the deep feeling, it might feel like you've got you'll flux into deep feeling, and all of a sudden that's something that will actually stay with you longer. When you have a deeper feeling, now all of a sudden you're working from about this area. You've got a deeper feeling. There's going to be something that's actually working good with you. That there's something that kind of stays with you, but doesn't always. It's just this this sweet spot of an area, but it's not quite an emotion. Then you sit in that. If you're doing your emotional preparations and you're working on any range of emotion, you could be working on regret, alleviation, anguish, assurance, awestruck, um, edginess, um, enraged, any of these things. You want to be able to then let yourself understand that you need to sit there longer, stimulating that emotion or stimulating that feeling. You want to be able to recognize that you're only at that point, at a point where you're at a feeling or a deep feeling. And then that's when you want to go and you want to start adding. So let's say you're working with emotional preparation using an imaginary technique where you're literally using your imagination to spark an emotion. Then you want to know that you're actually at the level of the emotion, and you know that you're at an emotional depth. But you by experience and by learning what I'm teaching here, you want to be able to know that that's not an emotion. If you go off of a feeling, or if you go off of your inclination, and you have a spark of something, you've done your emotional preparation, you've thought about this thing, you've saturated yourself in that emotional range, you may go and start working, and immediately you work. The first moments are always hopefully able to you receive your partner, and then you may never be revisited back by whatever you were working on in your emotional preparation period. This is because you never actually activated the emotion. This is critical. You never have activated the emotion, you only activated a feeling. Now, when you activate a feeling is flirting. You don't want to you don't want to always um, underestimate. You want to be able to be very accurately estimating. Are you knowing that you're in a feeling? Is this feeling going to be something that's going to leave you when you start doing the interaction? Now, let's look at the side of it of doing, the doing side of acting. Now, let's say you're doing an emotional preparation and you're doing an emotional preparation for what's traditionally called a Meisner activity. You got your emotional preparation done. You go in and you only worked down this emotions triangle to get your inclination, or maybe even you've got a feeling. And then you go, oh, great. You've got your emotional preparation and you start doing the activity. You start doing the activity, but your emotion does it, there's no, your emotion hasn't been activated. You haven't actually done emotional activation because it hasn't activated. And now what happens is that you literally are in a place where you're not working any, you're just literally just doing the activity. So the camera is going to look at you and it's going to know that you're completely blank. Now you might think to yourself that you've gone ahead and you've done your acting technique process. Look, acting techniques come and go like flies on the wall. It doesn't matter. They'll come and they'll go. Acting technique, the only acting technique that you need to develop is your own acting technique. Your own ability to be able to activate emotion is the only thing that's going to be able to consistently be able to release your talent. You release your talent in acting by releasing your emotion. You don't release your feeling. Your feeling is never, it's going to be, it's not going to be something that's concrete enough to be able to work from. That's why I think it was called emotional preparation. They had to use the word emotional. That's why it's called emotional recall. They had to use the word emotional. They were working to be able to get at the level of emotion. That's why it was called Gut to Gut in New York City. Very, very, very important. So when you've got your inclinations, you've worked past the inclinations, you've worked past into your feelings. Now you've got some tinglinations in your feelings, and then you work into your deep feeling, and your deep feelings is when the tinglinations sit there and stay there a little bit. Now, I've seen this a lot. A lot of times people will, they know that they've got something that's sitting there, and their own instinct knows that that's something that's good for their acting, but they don't realize that they need to sit there longer. Now, what can you do when you're stuck in a deep feeling state and you haven't really quite got it into an emotional state? That's when you want to go and you want to add on another imaginary thing that would add on to make something go deeper, or you want to add another detail to something that's able to work with your acting. Let's say you're working with emotional memory. Some people call this emotional recall. You're working with a past prior memory on an emotion, and you get to a certain point, but that past prior memory only gets you into the feeling state and a little bit into the deep feeling state. That means that you've got to be able to do something that's part of your self activation. You've got to figure out a way to self activate the emotion. You don't want to self activate the feeling. And then you might have already done the technique correctly. You've gone ahead and done the emotional memory, or you've done whatever the heck it is, whatever technique you're learning to be able to activate emotion, and that memory wasn't good, or it was only good enough to get to the feeling state. That's still something that you can work with. You work with the feeling state and you add another imaginary layer into it. That's why I talk about layering emotional preparations. You want to layer emotional activations, because the one activation might only go as deep as an inclination. And then you might have to add a whole bunch of imaginary stuff to your deep feeling or your feeling that was in your time of your emotional preparation. And when you add another detail or another, even 5 or 10 details, you're working to be able to add whatever you need to so that you can go down that elevator. And then hopefully, when you start mixing the past memory, what you had with your imaginary memory, hopefully then you'll finally hit that curve, you'll hit it, and all of a sudden you'll hit an emotion. And when you hit an emotion, sometimes that will be when you cry. Sometimes it won't be. It will just depend on the actor. But but you'll feel the emotion, and it will feel like it's engulfing you. So the feeling of emotion is a feeling like you're protected by something, but you're often, protection is not protection. Sometimes it is, but sometimes in this case you could be protected by or engulfed by anger, or you could be engulfed by regret, or you could be engulfed by despair, or intolerance, or you could be completely invigorated and you're going to feel like you're completely engulfed. That's the bubble of emotion that comes over you once the emotion is hit. You get your emotion activated, all of a sudden this is going to happen. Now, you would never have many cases, I would say, I'll almost, maybe, possibly, I don't want to say how many, but a lot of situations. Um, Now, I've seen these emotional preparation techniques for years and years and years and years. And once I was finished watching 6 or 10 hours of classes, I would go and then work on my own emotion stuff, and then I would fall asleep completely exhausted and love it. And that's how I lived for so long. So the thing is that you're working to be able to add details until you can get at that level that you need to get at. Once you're able to get into the emotion, then you still have another decision to make. Do you need to make that emotion deep, or you need to make that emotion light? Is this a emotion? I mean, you could be working off of a belief. If so, you're going to have a belief, and you can see movies like this where people have a strong belief in something, which is great, wonderful. And that might be part of the protagonist hero story, or some sort of protagonist story of the plot line or storyline, and you're able to tap into that, and you have a belief that is able to work with the script, and you're able to keep going into that belief. But the belief by itself is likely only going to go to the depth of inclination. You're not going to get typically into the feelings or the deep feelings or the emotions, or the last one is the deep. You got the, well, you have the deep emotions, and then there's another one that I call gold. It's like just absolutely gold. Everything that you would do when you get deep enough is in that frequency, and then you know that you've hit it. You've hit it, and it's completely in you. Now, if you go off of a belief and you're working off of a belief system, you're only typically going to be able to work off of your own belief systems to the inclinations. This is how we're designed. This is how we're built. We're not going to be in a simple state of, we're not going to typically go right into an emotion unless there's interaction. And you can see that if people have, two different people have belief systems, they have a conversation, and then based off of the interaction with each other, then all of a sudden they'll jump during the interaction, they will jump into an emotion. But it will be the interaction that brings them into that emotion. And you can see that in acting classes and acting scenes too. Every single place that you look where people are working only from a belief system, that's typically how the belief systems will work. So how you work with that is you can start with a belief system, but then you're going to bring in possibly an imaginary component, or you're going to bring in, add a real life memory to what your belief system is. And then that will take you further into your emotional life, and you'll really be able to get into your emotion. So we understand here that we're working to be able to activate ourselves, our emotions, everything around about us. And we're able to do that at a level of depth where the depth is actually going to be able to ricochet ourselves. When we say ricochet, we're literally feeling a visceral ricocheted experience. There's this whole thing that's happening to us. We're literally feeling the experience of the emotion, and we are under the emotional influence at that point. And that is a term, by the way, that I need to write more about. It's basically emotional influence, and I know that there, but other people have, I think, mentioned influences of of character arcs, and then you've got a whole bunch of different things where there's incredible depth to this, and your ability to be able to get to that level of depth is going to be what's going to be able to work with you. So let's look at one simple example here. Um, let's look at ecstatic. So let's say you're ecstatic, right? So let's say that your emotional preparation, the emotion that you need, your activation of emotion that you need for your acting scene is ecstatic. So you might have a belief, or that you know something that makes you ecstatic, and that will get you partially down that emotions triangle. And then when you get to the point where you know it's not going into an emotion, which is, if you listen to yourself, you're going to be able to tell that as an artist that you are. You're going to be able to tell when you're activating an emotion versus when you're activating just a resonance, or not only a resonance, but an inclination. That was the wrong word. When you're working with the ability of belief, you're going to typically only go to that depth, and now you want to add something else to it. Maybe it's a prior experience of ecstaticness, and then you get yourself with your own emotion activated, and that's going to be totally different than the actual acting scene circumstance. And you get that working in yourself, and then you sit there longer, and you go, and you might add an imaginary quality to it, and all of a sudden the imagination, what if this happened, what if these things were true, what if I can add the fact that this other thing happened, or I don't know, some people uh, care to meet people that are famous or not, and they might say, well, what, this is how they'd feel if they met so and so. That's great. If that's how you are, that's fantastic, because it's motivational. um, and then that might be a thing that you can imagine, and then you can go in, and then all of a sudden that needle will move from the inclination through into a feeling, and deep feeling, and then you'll be able to hit the emotion. So sit with these things, work with them. I think I've explained this enough for you to be able to understand pieces of it, but do ask some questions too. Thanks very much.